Scotch are semi-regular at the moment. Get together with friends to talk about the things that really matter. The whole point of Scotch and Watch is to have a conversation about the collision of big media and big tech, okay, and to talk about AI and all the things that impact on our industry, but to do it in a unscripted, honest, and very authentic kind of a way, helped by the fact that I'm always drinking scotch. I'm joined by my usual co-host, Chris. Chris, you're in London. What time of the day
Yeah,
is it with you?
just past 1 o'clock here, so not quite Scotch time on a Friday yet.
That's it. My dad used to say that's the yard arm. You can have a beer at that time. But we're also joined by a very, very special friend and a bit of a VIP. I'm thrilled to have him on. Jason Kint. Sir, I haven't seen you for a little while. It's been too long, and I think this might be your first appearance.
I think it has. I think it has been. It's been a long time, and this is my first. I think on your show, so I appreciate you having me.
Wow,
From yeah, so I'm South Florida for 24 hours, so
you're always on the move, my friend. And I don't ever remember seeing you not in a hotel room. So you're obviously doing your bit for the industry.
Yeah, that's right. I am here for 24 hours for the industry. Anyway, good to see you.
Mate, absolute pleasure. So look, today, let's have a chat about, well, first of all, let's talk about the remedies. Jason, can you please get them moving along? It's been some time now. This is like, you're waiting for the new Top Gun movie to come out and you have to wait months and months and months and months and months. What is going on? I thought we'd have it by now.
There's a magical event that happens in August where the clerks switch over and Judge Mehta wanted to get it out before that happened, and it's almost the end of August, right? So I imagine we will have them, if not later today or sometime next week. So that's clock is definitely ticking.
Yeah, it sure is. So, all right. Well, look,
but
there's nothing we can do about that.
No, we can't do anything to rush out the orders, but there are elements in them that are, they might seem minor overall to Google or to the larger industry, but they're really, really significant to publishers. And so very interested in seeing where Judge Mehta weighs in, particularly on AI. So excuse me for that.
Yeah.
Particularly on AI, yeah.
So Chris and I were on a call last week with, I don't know how many publishers were represented by those industry groups, Chris, but, several hundred, maybe even as many as 1,000 all up across all the industry groups. I did one with Europe. I did one in Australia. I did one in the States to talk about, kind of where we're at in this remedy process and what's being discussed and what we might expect. And to your point, Jason, there are elements in the remedies that aren't that relevant to publishers, and there are some that are massively important. And the one I always notice is the one about, untying the ability to be in search and also being able to license your content. And that's the one that doesn't seem to get a lot of coverage, but I think probably has a ton of gravitas for our industry, right?
Huge. And from being at the trial a good amount of time, I really do believe Judge Mehta understands why that's so important. It just, for closing arguments, it didn't get as much play. And during the remedies trial, it just wasn't, I think it's pretty clear what's being asked, which is, hey, I should be able to tell Google, I don't want to be used for training of AI without being punished in search because they have monopoly power in 95% of the mobile queries. So it's pretty logical. And it's just a matter of seeing that in the order.
Yeah, indeed. And the other one that doesn't get much coverage and that I think is really important was that piece about the escrow, Jason, and the idea that money's being put aside to help the industry cope with the switchover, if indeed there is a switchover that comes as the end of this remedies. And so, those things, when you read through all the hundreds of, thousands of words, you find these little nuggets, and they're the ones that really matter to the publishing industry. And so I know we're all looking at those.
Yeah. And the Chrome divestiture is the thing that gets the most attention because it affects everybody, and it's super interesting, and we'll see where he weighs in on that. But
yeah, I saw Ecosia threw their hat into the ring this morning.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they threw their hat in and said, "We'll take."
They have
we'll
money.
take-
How does? Yeah.
They said we'll take the money for nothing, but the money that it generates we'll put back into the environment.
So will I, Ricky. So will I.
Yeah,
And just
I know.
give it to the publishers, and we'll kick back some money into
That's
the
the classic-
into the ring.
The classic Michael Corleone bid. My offer is nothing. I'd appreciate you pay the transfer fees.
Yeah. Look, I just want you to know that my offer is also nothing, but you should see my garden.
Yeah.
It is like the best garden, right?
Yeah.
All right. Okay. I don't think any of us are going to get it. So maybe we should move on. Let's have a chat about AI overviews. So, look, this is really, really close to my heart. And I know it is to yours too, Jason. So I've been following AI overviews for 18 months, getting on 2 years now, actually. And it was a patent. The first time somebody rang me and said, "Hey, here's a patent," and a whistleblower gave me the link to the patent. And as both of you know, I'd been running an AI company for 9 years up to that point. So even though it was a very complicated technical document, I was able to kind of extract enough from it. And what it very clearly said was, we're going to take content from the open web, train a search engine to answer the question instead of send a link. And then we're going to learn about who the user is and learn what their knowledge is about that topic and tailor it to them. And I thought at the time, wow, what a fantastically innovative product that's absolutely deadly to our industry, right? And it was just such a classic big tech. Yes, I can solve the problem for the consumer. I am myopically focused on that. And it's just going to bite the hand that feeds. And that might not last forever. We're 18 months down the line. Jason, I've been chatting to the world and his wife about this forever. Where are we at? It's not looking terrific, right?
That's right. I mean, the data, we now have year-over-year data really for the first time, and we're seeing the clear traffic hit, and it's logical. It's why you were ahead of things probably at the time, is it's substituting the experience. So, if you type something into a prompt, you really no longer need to click through or go to the premium publisher or any publisher that was the source of that intelligence information or reporting. And, it's now being replaced by something clear traffic impact year over year. And it's deadly.
Well, Chris, I think you've been involved in some stuff in the UK as well, haven't
you? Yeah, so in the UK, there's obviously the competitions authorities here have got a designation of investigating Google's kind of search monopoly, and they've asked for submissions from publishers on trying to quantify, I think, real life impacts. And it's pretty consistent, actually, I think, Jason, with what the Pew Research showed and what DCN have said, which is, you're talking up to 25% drops in traffic, and very specific. We can go into those a bit later if you'd like, but sort of some really specific examples where, to your point, Jason, there is, all the evidence you need of substitution. The consumer is getting the information that they came for without having to leave to go to the website that originally provided it. And so I think, but both sides of the pond at the moment, regulators are kind of, they have easy access to a lot of evidence that shows the impact of AIOs on publishers.
When we looked at, I think I've seen some of these different studies, and they're all kind of triangulating on the same issues. And, we looked at it across our members, number of our members all using, the real data that they see from the traffic. I mean, so we're not depending on kind of a third party out there trying to make projections, if you will. And what jumped out was, and we even used a median to kind of look at the data, was they were down 10% year over year on average over this 8-week period that we looked at it. And so kind of getting out of the news cycles issues there. And, so it was consistent, and it was like, 2-to-1 being down. So it wasn't like just, the ebb and flow, if you will, that we've seen over the years. It was kind of, most people are all down materially. And And yeah, up to 25% was the common window that they were down. So it's huge. And then we looked at non-news sites separate from news sites to try to, again, remove the news cycle element. And the non-news sites were down even further, kind of as the evergreen, if you will, material. So it's a real problem. And in the Pew study was interesting because it kind of focused on the likelihood to click through, but also where they were clicking through. And what we saw in that study was Wikipedia and YouTube and Reddit and kind of user generated content, which doesn't have the same level of integrity, right, as professional content. So that's just very concerning too. What's being replaced. So
one of the really interesting pieces, I don't know if you recall, was that way back in the day, some of your members, Jason, and I, and UK Press Gazette, and a whole host of others, all partnered up, and we did a survey, right? And so what we did was we invited all these publishers to share all of their search engine data with us and their keywords. And we ran a study on how many of those keywords were going to AI overviews and how many of them were going to traditional search, and to compare the outcome of the two of them side by side. It was the Daily Mail, Trinity Mirror, Hearst, Press Gazette in the UK, and MI3 in Australia. And we did this together, and we learned some really interesting things. The first thing we learned was that it was clear that there was experimentation going on behind the scenes, because traffic could go up and then down and then up and then down. And every single day they were trying to figure out at Google what was going to be the optimal outcome. This is my dance, by the way. I hope you like it.
Yes,
it's Friday night. But the other thing was that eventually this standardized on certain core verticals that they decided that they wanted to own. And they were the valuable verticals like travel and health, and like breaking news and general entertainment. They didn't care about that. And you saw all of these charts suddenly show that these valuable verticals were the ones they were sucking up. And interestingly enough, we're now 18 months later. There's a class action. We talked about it last week, or a couple of weeks ago, didn't we?
Yep.
Chris Dicker, who's leading the class action in the UK. His case that's been brought on his behalf is based on that data that we did, because it's a baseline set of data to be able to show the difference between then and now. So getting ahead of some of this stuff's been really useful. But are you seeing any signs of hope in that stuff, Jace, or is it just all just downhill and relentless, and Google frankly doesn't care anymore because antitrust is coming?
No, I think they care. I think they are also trying to. I mean, we learned this during the search liability section of the trial. They need to do whatever they can to still hit their quarterly numbers, which they continue to do, and so they're, in their words, they're shaking the cushions to make sure that they still protect the golden goose of ad revenue for them in search. And so, you're seeing that too, where they now, according to our analysis of the last quarter, it was the first quarter where 90% of their ad revenue was derived from their owned and operated platforms directly, and only 10% of it came from networks, from the publisher. So, yeah. So, that's higher margin revenue. It helps them hit their numbers, right? And so there is a positive for them and in all this. And, if somebody lets them have their cake and eat it too, then they also won't have any liability. I mean, this is quite out there. So, but, I think if they actually could draw the world that they actually would like, and some of their proxies would like, they wouldn't have any liability for anything that comes out of the generative AI too. So they'd be able to create the content using content that they arguably stole from the rest of the web using their monopoly power, and then they wouldn't have liability for whatever they create. And I think that's highly unlikely. I don't think that would survive dismissal in the court. But that's the world they're painting. And so there are publishers that, back to the positive side, they're trying to figure it out. They need to. Discovery patterns are changing. We are a very forward-looking group, so we're always trying to find the opportunities within both AI overviews narrowly, but also AI more broadly. And there's a lot more opportunity on AI more broadly, but there are changes in behavior, and I think there's opportunity there, particularly around, new experiences and ways to, to produce and package content. So we'll see.
Interesting. Can I just come back to your point about the 10%? So I think this is something that gets lost a lot. And I was inspired by you and your work, Jason, on this. So these days, and it's always kind of a bit of an in-joke for Chris and I about the fact that I love nothing more than reading deep numbers in a 10K these days. That's my absolute thrill, is getting my hand on one of those. But what I always do whenever I get it is the first thing I look for is the network advertising share of Google's revenue. And so I want to know how much it's sharing of the pool of ads that it has with the rest of the open web. How is it oxygenating the open web, which is publishers and everyone else? And to your point, it dropped below 10%. And we're now at the point where quarter on quarter on quarter, for I think 6 quarters in a row now, it's been a steady trend line down, as if you knew that a change was coming and you needed to keep the money in your owned and operated businesses, because it might just be a situation you might just lose these cases. And then I think they were down 4.1% last quarter. And so this is now less than 10%. And so we've got a situation where one monopolist that controls a massive amount of the advertising market is only sharing less than 10 cents on the dollar with the whole of the rest of the open web. That's incredible.
It's incredible. And it's, when you look at where Google started, right? I mean, originally it was not wanting to have advertising in search at all, right? But let's put that aside and realize that they're a for-profit company and they wanted to make some money. But it was 50-50 at one point back, 2 decades ago. It was 50-50, and it has just very steadily, year over year, spread so that it's now 90-10. And, it's controllable by them. We know that, right? Just even simple things like putting more ads on the tops of the experience.
100%.
So, yeah.
They're losing that crown, though, to Meta. I saw that Meta was up 11% on ad load and 9% on ad price this last quarter, right? It's a bit of a race to the top at the moment, it seems to be.
But that does speak to also just the kind of, I mean, one of the things we talk about a lot is just there was an original deal with Google, which was, we will let you crawl the sites, you will deliver traffic, we will share the kind of open web advertising revenue. And now if you were saying, actually, if I share, I don't have the ability when I share, I can let you index my site to differentiate between you putting it in overviews or not. I can be at the top of the rankings and see my traffic drop by 25% because you launch an AI overview created from that content. And by the way, the actual share with us coming out to the open web is down now at it's going to be less than 10 cents on the dollar, probably in the next quarterly earnings. So just the balance of trade. And I'm always looking, I think, in these cases to say, well, and why on earth would people sign up to that? And that's where you get to, that's where you always end up back in antitrust, I think.
Yeah, you have to. Yeah. But you're also hitting at something too, Chris, that I think is important, that I've been trying to make sure I'm focused on, because I think it's what matters more broadly to, not just one part of the ecosystem. There was an original deal, unwritten deal with the open web, right? And that we get to crawl the web and we'll help people find you. And so this isn't just a problem for premium publishers or publishers, professional publishers, news organizations, which matter so much to society, but it's a violation of the open web premise, right? And so it affects the entire open web. And I think it's everybody's problem then. And you're back to anti-competitive behavior, and we'll see where the remedies come out. But
yeah. So that's, go on, Chris.
I was going to say, I did read Liz Reed's note about this kind of the Google blog, which was like, we're addressing this issue, and there's a couple of bits in there I would kind of throw on the table here just for, I'd be interested in your views on. One was, she says, traffic is broadly stable, by which I interpret that as it's slightly down, but not enough that I have to say it's down. So you're talking about kind of 1-2% down year on year. But she points out that that's different in different parts of the web. So, we're interested in where the winners are, and we think it's probably Reddit, Wikipedia, YouTube.
Yeah.
Seem to be the winners. She said at one point, like, nobody cares about the open web as much as we do. Brackets, we have 95% of the market here, right? So nobody cares about that as much as we do. But there
They
does
always
seem to be
lean into that. Yeah.
Yeah, there does seem to be this sort of this positioning, which is, yeah, we see this is happening. We're not sharing any of the data. We're not going to really be clear about what is happening, and this isn't something people need to worry about. I wonder what you made of that kind of Google blog.
It's it's typical Google spin. You just gave me it triggered me to deja vu on
Me
ad
too.
block. I mean, back on, I don't know if you remember back. I mean, it was almost a decade ago, but when everybody was super worried about ad blocking, not that they're not still concerned about users installing ad blockers, and there's this moment in time where it'd been reported, and Google, I think, had confirmed that they were actually paying to have their own ads whitelisted and not blocked, but everybody else was getting blocked, and they're like, "Oh, we'll fix this problem. We care about the open web as much as anybody." And so they were going to come in with their own solution. And you can imagine the solution, it wouldn't hurt Google, let's just say, right? You look at it, you say, well, a lot of these tactics are all going to be supportive of Google's business, but it's certainly not going to hurt Google's business. And so you don't want the benevolent dictator even that's going to come in and just, come in with a magical solution because you believe that they care about the open web. At the end of the day, they care about their revenues and profits, and that all came out, very clearly in the evidence at the trial. So, yeah, I don't buy that. And also the other question is, when they say look at the entirety of the traffic and it's down, let's say it's only down a couple percent. I mean, the volume we're talking about, and then what's the quality underneath that's feeding into it. And ultimately Google will eat its own face if it's putting everybody else out of business, but over time. But you can't just treat the entirety of the clicks and content ecosystem of the entire web equally either. So we don't know what's going on underneath that.
I mean, that's what interested me. It's just a big disparity, isn't it? If you can, let's say Google is 1% down, at their kind of total traffic level, and the publishers we're talking to are 25% down,
right?
Then someone somewhere is up. But I'm not. They're not people that talk to me. I can tell you that. There's nobody that is kind of doing a victory lap. Potentially.
What was Reddit? I don't know if I saw Reddit's.
They did.
Traffic. Did you see Reddit's traffic for the quarter?
Yeah, they flew. So there's an interesting thing about the Reddit. There's this interesting thing about the Reddit stuff, right? Which is that Reddit was used initially, if you remember, for AI overviews back at the very beginning when it was I can't remember what it's called, Search Generative Experience, SGE. And they did that deal for 70 million right on the dawn of
right for the IPO
listing. IPO. And so its IPO was, I think it was aiming for somewhere between 3 and 4 billion. It ended up doing 9. And so so Reddit banks a fortune, and all its content then goes over to Google, and Google uses it, and then unfortunately it recommends glue on pizza, and it all goes wrong, and suddenly all the levers are stopped. Don't use this. This is terrible. It's a terrible experience. And then over time, they've just slowly worked their way back, because ultimately they want to wean themselves off the open web, so they effectively can keep. It's almost as if Reddit is part of their owned and operated ecosystem, right? And so none of this services the open web, and that's really, really challenging, right?
Yeah. There's a bit of language actually that I think Liz Reed used, which is, so I always, when I read the PR pieces, I'm always interested in just what's the word that wasn't in the last one that's kind of been crafted and dropped in there. So there was a bit of talk about we're seeing much more traffic going to creators, we're seeing much more traffic going to communities and forums. And that was, but almost like that was just, this is just the natural kind of ins and outs of the world of the web. So it did make me wonder. I mean, Google obviously owns one of the giant creator platforms and doesn't count that as internal traffic, which is YouTube. But it did make me wonder whether, if the big beneficiaries are going to be forums, and why that would be particularly in Google's interests.
Oh, well,
It's a good question. Yeah.
yeah, it is. But
Yeah.
there's a lot of silence. Look, there's a lot of benefit for Google to make sure that it keeps Reddit happy, right? Reddit is massive traffic, massive content, right? And so that kind of user-generated content is probably much more in the kind of mental ethos of Google, perhaps. But I will point this out about Liz. When I mentioned Liz, sounds like she's my best friend. Never spoken to her. Couldn't point her out in the street. But I do read. I feel I know her well because I read a lot of the stuff that she does. And when she first came in, there was do you remember this, Jason? There was a massive changeover in the staff of Google Search when she came in. Like the guy that used to run search and had run it for years left, and several other people left. And it looked like a changing of the guard. And I think that those people, the people that had been there, were deeply passionate about doing search and finding the right stuff for the consumer. I think they were passionate about that. And what you saw was, okay, antitrust, or at least a major change in our business, is about to occur. Revenue needs to be the priority for the next little bit. And these people were like, well, I don't want to diminish the product for that. But ultimately they did. And, I said when she was hired, I said, she's been hired to break search. Yeah. To stop what it did and create a new future of search, which is about revenue first, cost low. At the end of the day, Jason, think about this. If you don't send the traffic to the publisher, you don't generate advertising inventory for the publisher that you then have to fill. If you keep it on platform, you retain all of it. It just reduces your pressure and increases your revenue. And I watched what she did. And the first thing she said when she first started on stage, and just went, I see where that's headed.
Yeah, we don't know what metrics. Sometimes there's metrics they're trying to drive behind the scenes that they're not sharing, and we don't know what metrics she's trying to derive. But I'm sure ultimately it leads to the revenue and profit. So, there's been a changing of guard over a number of years, actually, and there's some milestones along the way that were kind of seemed like they'd be unbreakable. That were in the search teams, it seemed like it was in their DNA, right? Like, we won't allow the data to be mixed with the advertising data, the search data and the advertising data to be mixed, or the web wide data to be mixed. And, that all changed a number of years ago, but that was a big deal. And, when AMP rolled out, if you remember AMP on the mobile experience, I mean, Google argued that, because one of the questions was, well, how can we trust, Google's involvement deciding what this language is going to be? And it was, well, it's our search team that's going to be responsible for it. So their search team was considered kind of the unflappable, almost kind of the equivalent, tried to be the equivalent of like a newsroom with church and state from the rest of the business. And that clearly wasn't the case looking backwards. So.
Can I ask about that, Jason?
Sure.
We've talked about this in the past. There are multiple periods over the past 15, 20 years where publishers have been promised the world by Google and have walked again and again into that belief. I'm trying to think what the first ones would be, but probably it was advertising and programmatic was one of the first. And then AMP, to your point. And then there was, what other ones have we had?
Subscribe with Google.
Subscribe with Google. What about the Google News Initiative? I look at them again and again and again. You watch them roll up. You just have to wonder eventually just how many times you're going to go, hey, that's a great idea. Let's do that. Because funnily enough, Australian Associated Press, AAP here, has just done a deal with Google literally last week. And they're the only one I know other than Reddit that's done a deal direct. And it's basically saying, hey, we're going to take all our content, we're going to train up Gemini, and they're going to give us their tech and make us NASA for news, right? This is going to happen. And I'm just sat there thinking, okay, I'm sure that's going to work out just great, right?
Yeah.
I just wonder how many times we just go, Yeah, sure. Let's give that a red hot go. What do you think, Jade? So are people now over it? Are your members now done with it?
They're getting, yeah, I think some of them are there, but the problem with, which is probably unique to Google versus a few of the other platforms, certainly Meta, where we saw that with Facebook, right? At one point where they were just like done. They're like, all right, this clearly is somebody we can't trust as a company, and we're going to deal with Facebook as a transactional platform that drives traffic to us and money to us. So marketing and maybe some revenue, but it's purely transactional, nothing more. It's not an asset we're going to build. With Google, they don't have that luxury. I mean, it touches their businesses in so many ways. It's their biggest probably source of revenue on a typical month and so it's more of a relationship where, they know they're going to pick some winners, and, being one of those winners can be really good for you. And so Google spreads around love and has enough new projects that they chase them, unfortunately. And there's enough new turnover, right, in the leadership that some companies are willing to make the same mistake again. So it's unfortunate.
I saw a number actually that I haven't seen published. I can't really think ever. I saw it in your article that you'd published, Jason, talking about AI overviews, and you're talking about the percentage of revenue of your members that comes from advertising. And I think you put the number, it was 70 something. Is that
78?
Right?
I think it was 78. Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't seen that number kind of explicitly stated for a long, long time. But I was actually talking with someone fairly recently at News Corp, and we were trying to remember the number it was when we left in kind of 2004, what it was and what it is now. And at News Corp now, it's less than it. My understanding here in Australia is it's slightly less than 50% here in Australia. So you're going to see regional variations. But 78%, is 78% still healthy, or is 78% struggling to keep the lights on?
We've been suggesting as much as we can, and we've been programming our events, our research, and trying to guide the industry off that, right, for a number of years. So it should be closer to that 50-50 for the, in aggregate. Would make sense for stability of publishing. So there are still going to be companies that are going to swing. And, there's some really healthy companies that have a majority subscription revenue. And so, but that number has not changed that much over the years. And it's just every once in a while, I like to make sure because we have it as part of our benchmarking that we do for our members. And I like to remind everybody that, hey, the world hasn't changed that much. And I know you've been trying to generate direct consumer revenue, but this is what pays for most of the professional content that's out there.
Yeah.
Right. Sorry, I need to jump in and ask on that just quickly, Chris, before we move.
No worries.
So in a meeting that Chris and I were at with all these publishers the other day, I made a prediction, and I'd love to sense check it with you, Jason, because I massively respect your opinion. What I said was, if we're about to have a breaking of the monopoly, which is really probably about advertising and monetization as much as anything else, it should be an expectation that publishers will be majority advertising funded in 3 to 5 years from now. That's what we should be thinking about, because if we're opening or cracking open $200 billion worth of advertising to go back to a meritocracy, publishers need to get match fit to go and get a share of wallet from that. Do you think that's right? Or do you think publishers should never go back to relying on advertising where it's competitive and find alternate revenue streams for security? That's a really big question, but I think it's the one that every boardroom's asking.
That's a really good question. I don't know that it has one answer, unfortunately, because I think the publishers overall should be much less dependent on advertising. I think that would be healthier for the ecosystem. It would, we focus on, and we use the word trust, but we focus on trust in news and entertainment, and that can, it's the eye of the beholder, right? But it's what the consumer, ultimately, it's what the user wants, and so it's kind of a good proxy for it, and they're satisfied with it, let's say, and so their willingness to pay for it or have subsidized in some way is also a really good proxy for the quality that advertising just doesn't support in the same way, right? And so, being closer to 50-50 would be, I think, much better. But you also asked, you had another question. I think it's a different maybe answer in there in terms of the goal or what should happen as part of unlocking, the abuse of Google on the both search and advertising side, and I'd argue App Store side too. That's already played out for the most part. And the goal of that should be driving that ad revenue back to the wider ecosystem, and that would come in the way of both, not allowing Google to self-preference. It also would mean that higher quality content would be recognized with higher value of advertising. It wouldn't be kind of mined for its data and context in the way Google can do right now. And so, so it's a little bit of a mix, but I think it's a really interesting thought exercise, Ricky.
I think we talked about them, didn't we, Ricky, about how much of that benefit is also coming in yield retention.
Yeah.
So how much of the change that's hopefully coming is it going to reduce the dilution that comes between what an advertiser pays and what the publishers actually receive as part of that transaction.
Well, this was 100%. Yeah. This is the point. In the evidence, it was revealed that 36 cents on the dollar was being charged by Google in effectively invisible charges that people didn't know. Again, if you're looking at your P&L next year, it should be 36% ahead. Which when was the last time a publisher put 36% on advertising in a year? That would feel like a good thing. But we do have more work to do. And Jason, you and I have spoken about this over the years. I was at a meeting. I can remember it's clear as day. And this would be back in 2007. It would have been 2007, 2008. I was called into a meeting by a commercial director who said, "You'll never believe it. We're saved. This incredibly brilliant thing has happened. All of those ads that we can't sell, we can now sell because Google's found a solution for us. And it's absolutely brilliant." And I said, "Okay, so what's the yield going to be?" And he said, "Ricky, it doesn't matter. Any dollar is a good dollar." And I said, No, that really, really isn't. But he's KPI'd on revenue. I'm KPI'd on profit margin, right? And you immediately saw this clash of cultures, right? Yep. And of course, Google played that all the way, didn't it? So I think it's going to be interesting once this market does crack open. The advertising market has got used to very low value, very low cost, very high value advertising by forcing people as peons to take what's on offer, right? We're going to have some real work to do to persuade these same advertisers that what they paid $2.50 for last week is going to be $6 now if you really want to stick it on the front page of the Wall Street Journal, right?
That's right. No, that's right. And that, I think we all watched that kind of play out, and it was a massive shift from, where we talk about the shift to programmatic, which in itself could have been benevolent and good. It's, that's really the automation of the process. But what also happened was that shift of kind of knowing where your ads ran and the higher value that you could get from them to just everything being treated as the same commoditized inventory with data targeting attached to it. And the metrics are different. You're right. I mean, it's a little like airline seats, and you have, media and finance people that look at it and say, if that seat's empty and I can fill it, I don't care what price I get for it. And suddenly you have a whole plane full of, very low priced tickets. And the more you do that, right? And so you could go, you could take that site that was 50% sold at a $20 CPM, and now you're 90% sold, but that other 40% came at $1 CPM, and then it shifted over time, and suddenly 90% of the site is $1 CPM, and that's not good.
I think the takeaway here is that we've got quite a lot of work to do, right? We've whinged and moaned and argued and pressured and been indignant loudly all over the world to push for a new future. And some of us are a little bit afraid now because suddenly that new future might actually occur. You have to be careful what you ask for. I don't know about your members, Jason, but certainly a lot of the publishers I'm talking to are just like, oh my goodness, hang on, like slow down. But it's kind of actually happening on our watch, and it's fascinating, right? So, Chris, I know your connections, Jason, I know yours, I know mine. Here we are out in the world right now talking to a lot of really, really genuinely scared people facing astonishing upheaval. And, if these appeals last the same length of time as the search appeal took, that means the App Store
the App Store.
we've got 2 years to get from here to some kind of solution on the other side, and that's no time at all.
No.
Yeah,
it's why you look. No, go on, Justin.
I was going to say, I mean, regarding the mood, I see a combination of not believing that things are actually going to play out, that Google will find some way out, and that's just being worn down over the years. And then yes, there's concern about the short-term risk, and that is, I don't know if it's interesting because I deal with digital executives that have been in this industry for years, that they thrive on change and disruption, and that's what makes them digital leaders of these big media companies, right? And so, this is what they're built for. But this is a lot of change that could be coming very quickly, and there is, I think, very much an understanding, the agreement, and all the means I'm in, that the current world does not work, right? The open web's going to break. It's breaking. The content's being stolen, is the words I hear, and the revenue's being milked into the monopolies. And so it's been going on for a while, and I think they're feeling a little optimistic that change is coming, and that's great. The one thing I would, on the appeals process, I just want to call out, is, Judge Mehta, if he does have in that order that, hey, you have to allow the publisher to say, no, you can't train on my content, where we started this discussion, he can put in place an injunction right away and say, Google, you have to stop now. Is irreparable harm. You're harming everybody. And I think every publisher and every member of the web should be pushing really hard for that, the moment, if that's in the order.
Are you feeling optimism from your members, Jason? Because Chris and I, I've mentioned three times now that I spent all this time with all these publishers, and several of them have come back to me afterwards and just basically said, why do you know this is going to happen? And I'm like, I don't. And they're like, well, how are you so certain? And I'm like, I'm not. And they go, but you're stating this stuff as a fact. And I'm like, well, it was said in a court. And they're like, yeah, but there's going to be an appeal. It's going to last for 10 years. And I'm said, says who? And there's this kind of misinformation, disinformation, but naturally defensive approach that I don't want to hear about it. And in the end, I just said to them, look, I can't prove a negative for you. I can't tell you it's a definite no, in the same way as I can't say it's a definite yes. But if you've got 2 years as a likelihood for an appeal process, or even if it's 3, that time is going to go in a heartbeat, right? And you have to prepare for the possibility that the future ahead is entirely different to the past that you've had. And pretending not to do it, or to wait for it to happen and then moan that it's all happened to you at once, doesn't feel the right approach. How are you, Jason? I actually help me be a diplomat here, because I'm frustrated. So I'm trying to help people do the right thing. How are you getting them over the line? Because I'm a warrior monk, but you're the diplomat. How do you make it happen?
Yeah, I mean, once we have the remedy order, if it has material changes in it and it comes out the way it looks like it might, then that's going to be a launching point. And they need to figure it out. That's their jobs. And I mean, it's as simple as that. That's their jobs, right? Their strategy for the future for these companies. And they need to understand that at that point, especially with the search case, it's based on a decision from the same circuit. And so I think the appeal process is pretty clean, actually. And based on what happened with the App Store decision being the appeal, it would look very promising at that point if Judge Mehta, gives the Justice Department what they're asking for. And so they need to, at that moment, kick in and figure it out, because that's their jobs, frankly. And so it's as simple as that. Yeah. The world will change. Yeah. Good.
Well, I think I reflected on a couple of those calls, Ricky, and I do think you're talking about 2 completely different types of change here. Because we quite often say, look, media organizations are used to change, so they should be kind of set up and ready for this. But I do think a lot of the changes that media companies have been good at rolling with have been tactical. So within the kind of framework that is set by the digital platforms, operational teams have been good at saying, well, Google is now rewarding this, Facebook is now changing the way it gives us traffic here, and so we'll be fast at basically reacting, but that's reacting to a change within a fixed set of constraints. What we're probably talking about here is we're talking about structure, the kind of the first structural reset of the open web for 20 years. And that's a different type of change. It's a different type of thinking. It's a different type of people. And you just mentioned it, Jason. This is more a kind of question for the strategy teams than it is right now probably for the commercial teams. And I think that's why we talk to a lot of, publishing commercial teams. They're quarter by quarter. They want to know that something's going to happen. Then the teams are set up to react. This is going to be quite a different set of challenges, I think. 3 years in, an ad sales team isn't a heartbeat. It's 12 quarters.
Yeah.
It's fascinating, isn't it? All right, so here's a question for you, because we should probably all get back to actually trying to save the industry. But here's a question for you. I want to hear a yes or a no. Here we go. All right, you're on the nose. I'll go with you first, Chris, just to soften up Jason. So you were CEO of Bauer Media, right, and managing director of the Times of London. Do you want to be the CEO now for this change?
Yes.
I love it. Let's do it. Jason, I'm putting it on you. Do you want to be sat in the CEO chair for this change that's in front?
At this moment in my life, this is totally the stuff that I thrived on. So I loved, and when I was on the operating side, I loved the disruption. I loved having to deal with unintended consequences and what could go wrong, what could go right. And so, and I loved, telling, leaders of other businesses that, like, hey, this is where the world's going. We have to figure this out. Right. And so, this is the type of stuff I absolutely love. So do I want to be spending my days and nights right now at this point in my career? I don't know. So we'll see if they call. I'm loving working. I love working with, with the people that are figuring this out, because some of the people that still to this day in our organization, on my board, et cetera, are some of the most energetic, excited people about where this world's going. So they just, they need better cards to play. So
that's a beautiful way to put it. I think you both probably guess what my view is. I am itching with frustration to get into trying to rebuild the future that we haven't had in front of us forever. Literally, I just can't wait. So I hope that the enthusiasm that perhaps we're not hearing yet emerges, and that we can continue to do the good work that I think we've been doing. Jason, it's been an absolute
good to connect with you.
We should do this more often, my friend, when you're not on an airplane for 5 minutes.
But, we should do it in your morning when I can have a scotch. So
yeah.
Everybody says the same thing, but I'm in charge. I'm in charge, so I get to choose the gents, it's an absolute pleasure. Great to see you, Chris.
Good to see you.
Keep it up, and I will catch you all next time. Thanks for coming.
Thanks, Ricky.
Thank you,
Jason.
Good to see you. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.